Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NRW, where nerds rule the world. And I am here today. My name is Heather Hurt. I guess I should start with that. My name is Heather Hurt, and I am with Mike Carey, who is a writer for two Comixology books that are two current Comixology books, one of which comes as of the release of this recording, it came out yesterday, um, February 18th. How are you today, sir?
Very well, thanks. Thanks for the invite. Good to be on the show.
Absolutely. We greatly appreciate you taking some time, especially since you're across the pond and I'm keeping you up, and I'm sorry about that. It's still daylight. It's still daylight. I want to just really touch on Ghostbox real quick. And then, of course, we will lead into the most important new release of the week, the LYCAN. But let's talk on Ghostbox a little bit. 1 through 4 are now out on Comixology, with number 5 arriving in March. Can you tell the audience a little bit about that book?
Yeah, I'd love to. It's a story of two sisters who inherit a pile of junk when an elderly relative dies, and a relative who they didn't even know was alive dies. And in among the junk, there is a box, and the box is full of ghosts. Everybody who dies in the vicinity of the box, instead of going to heaven or hell or any other kind of afterlife, goes into the box. Therefore, the box is full of hundreds of sort of personalities. They've been put there for a reason. The box dates back to the origin of the universe. It's one of the oldest artifacts in existence. And there are a group of kind of terrifying, shape-shifting monsters called the Estival, who will stop at nothing to get the box because they have a very specific use for it. There's also an angel in the box. Nobody's quite sure why. And the angel is in very, very bad shape. And it's his story that kind of comes into the fore in the last couple of episodes.
And that was one thing that kind of got me. It's this story didn't necessarily seem biblical, but there is like this element of godliness. And of course, you got an angel just sitting right there, hanging out in what looks like a cathedral. So why mix in both real world history and mythology, Christianity kind of thing?
I guess I love cosmic horror in all of its different flavors, and that's kind of what this is. The origin of the monster is sort of way outside of normal time and space, and the sort of the origins of Judeo-Christian mythology, the existence of angels and demons, is tied into that. It's a sort of folk memory of something much older, that we've kind of partially assimilated or partially remembered. It's become part of our collective consciousness. And Lion of God is the angel is a survivor of an appalling conflict that happened right at the dawn of time, and in a way has never been resolved. The other shoe has been waiting to drop for 13 billion years. It drops in issue
Oh,
5.
of course, of course. Um, so then my question is why put this at the perspective of two young women, one of which we find out very quickly. I'm sorry to spoil. The book has been out. Go get it. How she dies, I'm not going to say, but one, of course, passes away, and one is still living. Why come from those two perspectives?
Um, we very much wanted to have the stuff that's going on inside the box to be in just as clear focus as the stuff that's happening outside in the real world, scare quotes. So for one of the sisters to die means that her story is then sort of like her scenes are inside the box, and there's a sort of balance between those two perspectives, and the storyline proceeds on sort of parallel lines through issues 1 to 3, and then the two sort of narratives collide spectacularly in the final couple of issues. So there was that. I think also I like chalk and cheese pairings. You know, Jan and Chloe are they're sisters and they love each other, but there's nothing else in common between them. They're very, very different personalities. They've had different life experiences. They come at the world in two very, very different ways. And again, those two sort of personalities and their different ways of kind of approaching a problem are going to be crucial to the way the story resolves.
Absolutely. And to clarify to the audience, is this supposed to be a mini series, or is this going to be a hopefully continued story?
It wraps up in 5. You know, we do sort of like try to resolve all the storylines. We would love to do more, but Pablo and I have talked about possibly continuing the story. Stuff that happens in 5 kind of changes the game. So if there were ever a part two. It'll be a different kind of story, but it will be fun to tell. It'll be fun to revisit.
Awesome. All right. Once again, that's GhostBox 1 through 4 are available right now on Comixology, and number 5 hits on March 25th. All right. But now we're going to talk about the king of books right now, the LYCAN number 1, which has premiered on Comixology as of February 18th. So at this recording, it's before then, so we're going to talk in a potential future commentary, but know that we're releasing this on the day of release, or as of the day after. I'm sorry. So with that being said, the LYCAN. One thing that really caught me is the story is by actor Thomas Jane and David James Kelly, but you wrote it. A lot of people who are fans of comic books don't necessarily understand. If you haven't worked in the industry, you might not understand what a created by versus a written by. I'm good at English, versus written by versus art. I mean, we see it a lot with Stan Lee. A lot of people think he's an artist. Could you explain what the difference is in using your book as an example? What's the difference between a story by and a written by?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's definitely a sort of your mileage may vary kind of situation. It depends very much on the nature of the collaboration and the nature of the property. If you're writing for mainstream comics in America, you're very often working with characters who were created decades ago, and you're sort of adding your own sort of like your own chapters to those very long ongoing stories. Is one of the coolest things about working in comics. In this case, there was a fully worked out plan for either a graphic novel or a series called The LYCAN. By the time it got to me, it had been broken down into 6 parts, and it was a very circumstantial document. A lot of the story beats, a lot of the structure, the story architecture was already in place. There were thumbnails of all of the characters, verbal thumbnails, not actual sort of sketches. And I was approached to turn that into script, to turn that already existing story into script. So what I added, I sort of fleshed out the characters. I wrote all of the dialogue. I made my own decisions about the pacing, although the breakpoints between the issues had already been decided. They were already in the plan to a very large extent. But the structure within the issues, I was responsible for. So it was me building on a platform that had already been built. A lot of the kind of the planning work was already there, and that's not something I've ever done before. Really, that was a unique kind of situation. I enjoyed it a lot.
With that being said, and you mentioned this before we started talking, this type of story also creates a long time. This is a timeline of work that you have to do. Can you talk a little bit about the process to bring this story from that generic outline to Comixology?
It's taken a long time. So I was approached in, if I'm not mistaken, 2010.
Oh,
That
wow.
was the point at which I first started discussing the LYCAN with Thomas. I was in LA briefly, and I think 2011, and we met up there. It's the only time we've ever sort of been in the same room, and we talked. We talked a lot about the characters and about the kind of overall tone of the story. And then I came home and I started writing, and I was done with the writing by the end of 2011. I think actually by summer of 2011. We got an artist on board, very gifted artist named Sean Connor. Gifted, but as it turned out, distractible. I think he had a lot of other stuff going on in his life, and the pages started to come in, and they were fantastic. I think there's a sketch of Sean in the first issue, in fact, as the frontispiece, and it's gorgeous, kind of Bernie Wrightson-esque woodcut style, lovely, fully rendered art with a really sort of fine Gothic feel to it. The pages looked great, but they started coming more and more slowly. And occasionally I would see Sean at British conventions, and I'd ask him how it was going, and he'd always say, "Yeah, it's going really well. It's going really well. There'll be more soon." But actually, it wasn't more. It was less. It was less and less. And eventually, he kind of dropped off the radar, and neither Thomas nor I really knows what's become of him since. And then it sort of lay dormant for a long time, with like a lot of issue 1 already finished in a very a very distinctive style. And the question was, what do we do with this? And in the end, what we did was put all of that to one side and started again with Diego. And I think that was the right decision. I think what he's done is absolutely gorgeous. Really lovely art, really lovely renderings of the characters. So it's come together, but it took 15 years, best part of 15 years to happen.
Why bring it to a digital concept like Comixology instead of to a imprint first comic series like Image?
Comixology gave it a home. As with GhostBox, we've been shopping it around in a number of places, and Comixology were the ones who responded to it and supported it and had a plan for it. So we were really, really happy to take that offer.
Absolutely. It's always fun as I'm a comic retailer in my past life, so I'm very curious. I love the physical form. There's nothing like flipping open the page of a book. But at the same time, you got to really appreciate what companies like Comixology are doing with such diverse stories. It's so great. With the art is very cinematic. It's very, very different from Ghostbox. Ghostbox felt a lot more just general comic-y to me. Like when it comes to like the actual read, I'm not saying that the comic itself is general. Don't get me wrong, but there's a lot more it's a lot more animated than the Lycan, which felt very painted. It felt very cinematic. Is there a reason why you wanted it so realistic?
I think it goes back to the question of tone, tone and voice, and this was the first time I had ever I'd ever written kind of like straight Gothic, straight classic Gothic horror, and I think that you can do that in a stylized kind of register, but I think it benefits from realism, benefits from being very, very grounded, and I think Diego's art provides that grounding. I don't know if that's an answer, but that's
No,
kind of
no,
how it.
that's absolutely great. It's there's just two. It's what's really cool about reading different stories from the same people is that you get to see how their words work alongside different designs and different styles. And I was just curious because it is the two books are very, very different. I was very lucky to binge Ghostbox, and then I of course read Lycan #1, but it was it's night and day. The art is night and day. So
Yeah.
it's absolutely tone
I,
is
sorry, I
no.
think with Lycan what we were going for. Sorry, with Ghostbox, what we were going for was kind of a Vertigo feel. The Vertigo of
Mm,
the sort of 90s and noughties kind of feel. It stands in that kind of tradition.
absolutely. Yeah, I could totally see that. Absolutely. With Lycan, Captain Coffin is a very, very interesting character. He's strong-willed, he's hard-headed, and he loves to work. And we only get to see a touch of what he can do as a hunter in issue #1. Who is he as a character so that we can get a tease of him going forward in the series?
I think he's a very, very sort of direct and simple man in many respects. As you say, he loves what he does. He loves every aspect of what he does, both the hunting and the being the captain of a ship, being part of a crew. And you can see, I think, even from the start, the very sort of close rapport there is between those men, between the members of the crew. In some ways, they're very disparate personalities. They come from different countries. They come from different religious backgrounds. Um, but he brings them together, and that's a sort of big part of who he is and what he does. He's also somebody though who has a secret. He's somebody haunted by something that happened in his childhood, and a lot of the decisions he's taken as a man, as an adult, are based not so much on what he wanted to do as on following up, like continuing on a path that began before he was able to choose, a path that has kind of been forced upon him. And we'll see the tension, I think, between the choices and the kind of the mission, the sort of the things that he's driven to as the story continues.
Absolutely. why set this story? So there's a lot of course, like in our werewolves is another name for a werewolf, even though we haven't seen the creature yet. As a spoilers, everyone, you haven't seen the creature yet. But why a creature story set in 1777? Why didn't y'all want to do it today? Other than Gothic stories are usually set in the past. Why 1777 when you have the political and a lot of religious turmoil going on, especially in Europe?
I think it biases a lot in terms of the sort of atmosphere of the story. And you're absolutely right. It could have been present day. It could have been same time period, but in sort of like Coffin's native Nantucket. Um, what you get, I think, from that time and place, I mean, because it's an island community, it's very much cut off from the outside world. There's no help coming. They are forced on their own resources throughout the story. Nobody's coming to rescue them. Um, and the other thing is, at that time in English history, at that time in European history, but especially English history, um, we're paranoid as hell. We think the French are at the door. They're going to come and they're going to do to us what they did to their own country. There's going to be a revolution. We're kind of terrified, and we're constantly sort of on the alert for that. So the redcoat characters, the soldiers who you meet in issue one, in many ways are their behavior is kind of intemperate. Their suspicion of strangers is extreme. Their reluctance to trust or work with Coffin and his men is kind of like very obvious. Ludgate in particular is somebody who sort of comes at this thinking, if you're not my friend, you're my enemy. If I don't know you, I'm going to assume that you're my enemy. All of that sort of arises from that historical context. Plus, again, it's Gothic. It's Gothic played straight with no camp elements in it, and that it feels like a sort of 18th, 19th century sort of locale for that. Feels right.
Absolutely, absolutely. So my final question for you goes and also referencing the fact that you said y'all started this in 2010. It's been a hot minute. It was before the pandemic ever happened. But with that being said, one of the big things of issue number one is that they talk about the disease that's affecting the island right now. There are a lot of stories kind of talking about isolationism, talking about disease going on right now. How would you say your story, other than the fact that it's older than everyone else's, how do you think your story differentiates from this onslaught of storytelling based off of basically the pandemic?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I think we benefit from it. I think I was just talking about the sort of paranoia on the island. I think this generation, the generation that's been through the lockdowns, that's been through the kind of chaos of COVID, can kind of savor this story in a more layered way, perhaps a more nuanced way than we had ever intended. Yeah, but yeah, you're absolutely right. It's become zeitgeist, and that's kind of weird. I was also writing a novel more recently that had a plague in it, and that I was writing it during the first lockdown. I thought, do I want to carry on with this? It's meant to be fiction, and it feels like journalism.
Oh, there's a lot of fiction that's turning into realism very, very quickly right now.
Yeah.
Saying that as an American, just saying it as an American. With that being said, Mike, thank you so much for your time today. Ghostbox, once again, Ghostbox 1 through 4 are out right now, with number 5 hitting on March 25. And LYCAN number 1 is arriving on Comixology as of yesterday, February 18th, for when this is posted. Definitely check them out. They are available for you. They were a lot of fun. They're two very, very different stories, though, and you'll definitely enjoy it. Mike, if anyone wanted to follow you or reach out to you with questions, where can they reach you?
I'm still on. I've still got a toehold in social media. I'm on the platform formerly known as Twitter, um, but not very often. I'll sort of come on and people say hello to me there, and the rest of the time I just lurk.
Well, what's your handle?
It's either Mike Carey 191 or Michael Carey 191, one or the other.
Perfect. All right, awesome. Well, and of course his profile is available on Amazon. So if you want to check out more of his books, please do. You can like, subscribe, share everything here. If you have any questions, you can also ask us in the comments below. Thank you guys so much, and we will see y'all soon.
Yes, Heather. Thank you for having me on the show.
Pleasure chatting with you. Love to all my nerds who rule the world.
Yeah. Nerds rule the world.
Yes, we do.
Thanks. Nerds rule the world.
Thank you.
I love the nerds ruling the world, so more power to you.
Patrick, what up, man? And yes, they do. Nerds rule the world, kid.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Awesome. Kuya P, nerds rule the world. Hello.
Yes, they do.
Yes.
Oh,
nerds rule the world.
I got.
It's in the title of your show, like nerds rule the world. Like I want more Black weirdos on screen, and I don't feel like we ever get to see that very much.
Thank you so much. Nerds do rule the world.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Nerds rule.
Love
it. It's your boy Kuya P, nerds rule the world. Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you.
Do. They rule the world, all right.
Yes. Take care, Tony. Thank you, guys.